Over the last few weeks, as we've traced God's great rescue plan, we've met some right characters, if we're being honest, all showing that they are very real, very human, some broken, all fallible. And God used them for amazing things. And today's character is no exception. Rahab plays a tiny part in the story and yet gets mentioned 3 times in the Bible, as we'll see later. She may have been fallible. She may have made mistakes. But she and the other women that we meet today are the unlikely heroines of God's big story.
The first of these 2 readings is from Joshua chapter 2. Rahab hides the spies. And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." And they went and came into the house of a prostitute, whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told to the king of Jericho, "Behold, the men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." Then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them, and she said, "True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." And the next small reading is taken from Matthew chapter 1, the ancestors of Jesus Christ. This is the list of ancestors of Jesus Christ, a descendant of David, who was a descendant of Abraham. From Abraham to King David, the following ancestors are listed: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah and his brothers, then Perez and Zerah, their mother was Tamar, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, Nahshon, Salmon, Boaz, his mother was Rahab, Obed, his mother was Ruth, Jesse and King David. This is the end of this reading.
It's not very often that the genealogy of Jesus gets read out in a service. This long list of so-and-so was the father of so-and-so, who was the father of so-and-so. It drones on, and is generally the point where people begin to zone out, glaze over, switch off, whatever, and start thinking, shall I go and put the kettle on and make a cup of tea? I need to put that on the shopping list. I must cut the grass, or any number of things that might pop into your mind. But I've put it in today for a very specific reason. Because on our journey through God's big story, as we trace the path of his great rescue plan for his people, we meet some unlikely heroines. There are 40 men mentioned in the whole passage. We only heard a part of it, but that traces the genealogy of Jesus right back to Abraham. But through that genealogy, there are only 5 women, and each one of them is an unlikely heroine in the story. The first one we find is Tamar. She is mentioned as the mother of Perez. Tamar had been married to 2 of Judas's sons, both of whom died before producing an heir. And Judah told her to wait for his 3rd son to grow up before she could marry him, and hopefully then he would produce a child to keep that line going. Do you remember we talked about this last week with Ruth and Boaz? But really, Judah lied to her. He thought that she was cursed, and he didn't want her to marry his 3rd child in case he died as well. And so he left her with nothing. She was a widow who had no rights whatsoever. She wasn't free to marry somebody else because she was pledged to Judah's third son. She was just stuck in limbo with nothing to do and nowhere to go, nothing on her side. So she pretended to be a prostitute, met Judah on a road, got pregnant by him and gave birth to twins. The eldest, Perez, was a forefather of Jesus. And then there's Rahab, the prostitute, who we'll come back to in a minute. The next mother mentioned was Ruth, who we talked about last week, a foreign widow with no entitlement to anything, who takes her place in history through her faithfulness and becomes a foremother of Jesus. Then we come to Bathsheba, who David committed adultery with. Let's make no mistake here. She was a young married woman of extraordinary beauty, but she would have had no say about being taken to the king to meet his needs. She was the victim here. When she gets pregnant, David has her husband killed and he marries her himself, but their child dies. However, her next child is Solomon, and he becomes king after David, and we'll hear about him in a few weeks. And then, of course, the final woman mentioned is Mary, the unmarried mother of Jesus, who would have had to live with all the rumours about her and her child throughout her whole life. Unlikely heroines, some with dubious pasts, some who did the right thing but had convention against them. Each one of them taken from obscurity and placed right at the centre of God's rescue plan. Because he doesn't look at what we've done, or who we are, or the colour of our skin, or what country we are from, or whether society judges us or not. He looks at our hearts, and he accepts us and loves us just as we are. I guess Rahab is the most unlikely of our heroines. A foreign female prostitute. Each one of those alone would have placed her as the lowest of the low to the Israelite army approaching Jericho. But all three together would have made her worthless, beyond contempt, beyond saving. And yet she, of all people, is mentioned in that great passage of faith found in the book of Hebrews. The writer to the Hebrews says, "It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies." She was the only woman other than Sarah, Abraham's wife, mentioned in that whole list. Why? Because she acted out of faith. Joshua sent the spies into Jericho to see what they would need to be able to take the city. And one of the best places to go and to hide would be the home of a prostitute. People were used to seeing strangers coming and going from there, and they would be able to get valuable information from her. But what they weren't expecting was her proclamation of faith. After hiding them on her roof and sending the soldiers away, she lowered the men down the outside of the wall and told them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We've heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Why did Rahab earn her place among the faithful greats and the genealogy of Jesus? Why was a foreign female prostitute, with everything against her, a part of God's great rescue plan? Because, like Ruth, she believed. She'd heard all that the people of Israel had done, and she believed that God was behind it. The Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. And she wanted in. She wanted to follow this amazing God. She wanted to get out of the life that she had led. She wanted to start again with God at the very centre. And that decision took her from obscurity to renown. So what does that tell us today? Well, I think that it's yet another reminder that God looks at the heart, not what we see outwardly. When Samuel was sent to anoint one of Jesse's sons as the future king of Israel, he kept meeting Jesse's older, handsome brothers, who were all very strong and capable looking. And each time he looked at them and he thought, this must be the one that God wants. And God would say no, because he had other ideas. And we read in the story of David, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him, each one of the brothers that went before. The Lord does not look at the things that people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Whatever the past, whatever the things that we have done wrong, like Rahab, however we've been used or abused, like Tamar and Bathsheba, however much we are judged by our race, our gender, our situation in life, like Ruth, however many rumours are whispered behind our backs, like Mary, we are children of the King. We are loved by him, treasured by him, and he takes us out of the obscurity of our own vision of ourselves, our own self-blame, self-loathing, self-doubt, and places an invisible crown upon our heads, puts robes on our shoulders, and proudly proclaims us as his daughters and his sons. When we put our faith in God, we join in the great community of faith, equal, loved and treasured. unlikely heroines and heroes of the faith. So put on your invisible crown. You're a child of the King.